In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. George Orwell. Yeah. This is Blood Politics. The only podcast where we don't talk about politics. We be about politics. And our mission statement is to empower, educate, and encourage everyone to speak out against fascism. Speak out against injustice and fight for freedom and equality for everyone. This is Blood Politics, and we ain't stopping till they put us in the grave. We ain't gonna
What's going on, guys? No time to waste there. There's no time to waste. I'm gonna hop right into things. What's going on? Welcome back to the show. I appreciate you for joining me. Really excited for today's show. For today's conversation. It's got to be a good one. Somebody that we've used his content almost every show, I'm going to say, pretty much since this, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, to kind of get the insights, the knowledge, what's going on the front, those type of things. I'm really excited today to be joined by the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Preston. We might as well bring him right in. What's going on, Preston? How are you? Let me see here. There you are. What's going on, my friend? I think you might be muted for a second there. I don't know why it mutes you right off the bat on StreamYard, but for some reason you have to.
Now we good now?
Yeah, perfect. My apologies for that. Still haven't figured out that route. I'm no Walter Cronkite, but I definitely am very happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out today as well. I know, just to give everybody a little rundown, a little background, you're a military analyst, Army veteran, one of the more recognizable independent voices covering modern warfare and geopolitics online. He's a West Point graduate, studied international relations and terrorism, served as a U.S. Army Field Artillery officer, including time with the 101st, and over the last several years has built a massive following on TikTok, YouTube, all of the other social media platforms as well, breaking down conflicts like the war in Ukraine, developments with Russia, drone warfare, the war with Iran, NATO strategy, broader global conflicts, general military facts and history, which I'm hopeful that we could get back to at some point. And then a lot of people know him for taking complicated battlefield developments, turning them into something regular people can actually follow without needing a Pentagon briefing and 3 energy drinks to understand it. His coverage combines military background, open source intelligence, geopolitics, and frontline reporting discussions that have made him one of the go-to creators covering the war in Ukraine and modern conflict in general. So we've got a lot to get into today: Ukraine, Russia, Iran, North Korea, the future of drone warfare, U.S. policy, media narratives, everything else that we could be getting into. So, Preston, once again, thank you so much for taking the time out for joining us here today.
Appreciate the invite, man. That was quite the introduction. Holy cow.
Now, let me know, did I get, I kind of have to do the whole Rachel Maddow thing here where I'm like, all right, correct me anything that I got wrong, anything that I misstated, anything that I overstated. So feel free to correct me and give my audience a little bit of a, just a general background on yourself, anything that I may have missed, anything that may be important to the audience and stuff.
I think it was great. It probably made me sound more important than I am by quite a bit, but all accurate, I'd say. Yeah, this is the full-time job now is media, talking about national security, war, and conflict. So something I enjoy. It can be dark at times, but I think it's the type of thing that brings out both, unfortunately, the worst, but also the best in people, which is always interesting to see. So yeah.
No, I mean, there's so much to dive into. It's going to be difficult to fit it all into one show here. But, knowing, that I used to watch your content when I first started following you, and it was like, military facts and, why U.S. soldiers in World War II wore nets on their helmets and Peleliu and talking about Bastogne and, all these, these general facts and knowledge that I'm sure hopefully one day you're going to, get back to when we don't have to deal with all of the craziness. But, just as a general icebreaker before we get into the insanity of Iran and what's going on in Ukraine as well, just a little bit of an icebreaker. So I know you're a history buff, you're a military history buff. I'm a big World War II guy myself. So what is your favorite World War II movie? If you could point to one, either a classic, a newbie, what's one that's your go-to, just kind of as an icebreaker?
World War II, the cop-out answer is Band of Brothers in the Pacific. Yeah, 20 episodes between the two of those. And I've been veering more towards the Pacific as of late. 101st guy. So Band of Brothers, of course, like that's it. But over the last few years, been more Pacific. In terms of a movie, though, I don't know. Saving Private Ryan's hard to beat.
I know. See, I like the older stuff. I'm an old soul. I grew up kind of, watching black and white stuff, desperate for 4K. Now that we have 4K, all the stuff that I watch is in black and white. So like I'm going backwards. So I like the Tora, the Guns of Navarone, In Harm's Way, those type of movies and stuff like that. So no, I appreciate it. Like I said, we have a lot in common, a lot we could chat about. But to get into just a little bit of the craziness, I figured we'd start with a little bit of what's taken place with the Strait of Hormuz and obviously the ongoing war with Iran. And basically, the first question I have is, do you think the U.S. administration genuinely understands the long-term consequences and ramifications of this war in the Middle East?
Yes, but I don't think they expected it to play out the way that it did. So we've got very smart people. The argument that they did not know that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed down is ridiculous. Like, we have people throughout government that for decades have known that that is one of the Iranian levers they can pull. I think more accurate or more likely is that that was downplayed as not a likely scenario. So I think everything we're seeing Iran do right now was not necessarily expected, but we knew it was on the table. My best read on the situation right now is we viewed it as unlikely that they would do certain things, and more likely that they would succumb and come to the negotiating table earlier than they have. So I think we long-term knew what this could get into, but it's hard for me to look at this right now and say that we planned on this being an 11 or 12-week conflict. Everything points to us expecting it to be very short.
Now, do you think it's more of a miscalculation in U.S. intelligence, or do you think this is more that Netanyahu and Mossad kind of got one over on Trump and made him believe that this was going to be a quick engagement, and they wouldn't dare touch the U.S. bases in the Middle East, and they certainly wouldn't go for the Strait of Hormuz because I'm no genius here, I'm no military expert, but even I know that the Iranians were telling us that they were going to strike inside of the U.S. bases, that was going to be their retaliation. The retaliation was going to be the Strait of Hormuz. We've talked at length here on the show about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which luckily to this point hasn't become an issue, which, we're likely to see if this thing escalates and starts kicking back off with bombs and drones and missiles being shot into Iran. And it's just like, I don't know, it's difficult for me in like wargaming. What is wargaming for? You know what I mean? Like, what are the likely retaliatory aspects? What are the likely things that they would do if we did A, B, C? Like, and it should have told anybody that has knowledge in this area that that's the one thing that they would go for. They would. Not only did they tell us that they would attack into our, the Middle Eastern allies that have U.S. bases that are allowing this war to happen from those bases, but the Strait of Hormuz and their proxies. So it's like, do you think this was more just Donald Trump's arrogance, ignorance, and willingness to go along with Benjamin Netanyahu, or do you think this was kind of like a combination of that and maybe a lack of U.S. intelligence actually thinking this could come to fruition?
I think there's a lot of factors here, but from what I've seen, U.S. intelligence has been pretty consistent. Even in the last few weeks, they put out assessments, not the anonymous leaks from some unnamed official, but the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency in front of Congress said that Iran still has thousands of missiles and now has expanded their war aims because they control the Strait of Hormuz. So that was the general assessment beforehand. I mean, if you look at the actual publicly available intel assessments, it's been pretty consistent for a while now, whether it's the status of the Iranian nuclear program or their capabilities that they still possess today. So that makes me think that maybe it was not believed, or we thought that maybe President Trump thought he knew better. And one thing that I think going into this conflict we have to keep in mind is there were two major operations that President Trump carried out over the course of his past two administrations that went very differently than most experts expected. You had the killing of Qasem Soleimani, which essentially led to nothing. The Iranians lobbed some missiles. There was some TBI for some American troops. But when you're talking about taking out the most effective head of the IRGC, that was crazy. It was a crazy step that he took that in the first place. I think it was a good step. The Iranian reaction was pretty muted. So I think he looked at that and said, okay, maybe I understand this situation or understand the Iranians better than some others. I think on top of that, then we had the Venezuela operation, which was, from a military perspective, pretty impressive, pretty flawless, all things considered. To go into a country, snatch the leader in the middle of the night and come back out without, there might have been a few Americans. I think there was a couple that were wounded, no Americans lost, no equipment lost. It's hard to imagine that any experts would have told him that it would have gone off that smoothly. So I have to imagine that from his seat, I wonder if he's thinking, I know better. And these people are too cautious. They're too pessimistic. And he did maybe view Iran a little bit in that context. When you loop in then the Israeli aspect, which look, President Trump is the one that makes the decisions whether or not the United States goes to war. There's not another country that makes that decision for him. But Netanyahu and a lot of people in Israel very much want the United States involved in a war with Iran. That's in their interest. So it should not be surprising at all that he would have been lobbying to get the United States involved. And I think there was an opening between Midnight Hammer. Again, here, I said 2 operations, 3, really. What happened after Midnight Hammer? Nothing. A performative few missiles launched into Qatar after we had time to remove soldiers and airmen from that base. Like, it was nothing. So
and this goes back to his first administration too, like you were saying, when Iran allegedly was calling Donald Trump to say, "Hey, we're going to be lobbing missiles at this base. We're not actually going to hit it. We're going to hit kind of around it, just to let you guys know ahead of time," type of thing. If you take the word of Trump and how that situation went too. But it's almost like you're stating, and I kind of relate a lot of things to World War II. It's almost like you're stating like kind of the German military's the achievements that they saw going into France, and the Allies not pushing back on them, whether it was Czechoslovakia or the Sudetenland, and them kind of feeling themselves a little bit and kind of feeling like they had a little bit more power, and then obviously Hitler himself taking over the military, like I know better than everybody else type of aspect. So there's a little similarity in that as well. But it's like, how difficult, as somebody who does this for a living, you do this daily, you're looking at the facts, you're looking at the statements from both sides, like how difficult has it been to get an accurate and clear picture of what is taking place? Because from what I've seen, the statements from the Pentagon, the statements from people like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, and then you compare those to the statements of, MB Ghalibaf or Aragchi or anybody else that's supposed to be representing the Iranian side, and they are so far apart and so different, and there's so much distance in between the two statements that it's difficult for me as somebody who's, just kind of getting into this game and is obviously not as militarily knowledgeable as you are to get a clear and accurate representation of exactly what's going on now and where we might be in a day, 2 days, a week type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a weird spot because we are used to the Iranians and a number of our adversaries being hyperbolic and exaggerating a lot of things. I mean, they said they hit a number of our aircraft carriers already in this operation. They didn't. They talked about shooting down F-35s. They didn't. We expect that from the Iranian government, and that's kind of baked into information as it comes across. We're not really used to that from our government, but we are seeing that. And I think the best example that I would point to is the term obliteration of the Iranian nuclear program. That's not a term that we use in the military. It doesn't account for anything. It sounds big. It sounds dramatic. It's a movie title. But does that mean like everything's gone? Does it mean that it's set back a few months? Does it mean that the entrance has been closed? Like, it's just a very vague term that sounds dramatic. So when we start using things like that, it starts muddying the waters quite a bit. And I think we've seen a lot of that, especially since this phase of the war kicked off, where we are exaggerating the successes and downplaying everything else to a degree that we've not usually done in conflicts. Usually we're a little more, for lack of a better term, a little more professional, a little more muted in how we relay some of this information. So there's not another good example here. Iran has shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They are attacking vessels with fast attack boats and missiles and drones. But starting a few months ago, we started to hear that the Iranian Navy was gone and completely destroyed. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. The Iranian Navy, the surface fleet, is by and large destroyed. There's not much left there. But that was never the major Iranian threat. The threat was it took so little to shut down the strait. So the messaging there, the desire to go over the top and say nobody's destroyed an enemy's navy in this amount of time, like, great, but it paints this inaccurate picture that Iran still has naval capabilities. And for the average consumer, average news viewer, average voter, that is very confusing. And I think that's a scenario that we created that did not need to be there. So yes, it's confusing to keep track of for sure.
And it's like you brought up already the reporting coming from our own U.S. intelligence assessments that say, Donald Trump's telling you that their drone and missile capabilities have been completely eradicated, much like you talk about the obliterated word. And it's like, well, that's not what we're hearing from the U.S. intelligence assessments. We're hearing, at first it was 40% of their capabilities left. Now we're hearing as high as 70%. I know some of the statements from the Iranian leadership themselves has claimed that they have even more than they had to begin with, to start the war with. Now they're up to 120%. You know what I mean? So it's like, take everything you hear with a grain of salt type of aspect with that. But it's like, what do you fear? Like, what do you fear the most? What's the situation you fear the most in this? I guess, just to start it off, mine would be, the escalatory aspects of the missiles and drones obviously being lobbed into Iran and the Middle East, but obviously if the Houthis start to take control over the Bab el-Mandeb, what that could do to global shipping, prices that we pay, not only at the pump for groceries and clothes and everything else. Obviously the Pacific, the Asian Pacific areas and the European areas are also paying the price heavily for this. So it's like, what scenario do you fear the most in this?
Well, there's a lot of ways it could go really poorly that we haven't seen play out quite yet. The sinking of an American vessel, of course, would be awful. We've not seen Iranian terror-sponsored attacks really around the world. There's been some loosely inspired ones, but very minor compared to what they could put together. So I think we have to dial it into what is likely or possible. And for me, the biggest concern in that regard is that we just walk away. And I think we're getting pretty close to doing that. The Iranians we have all known for a long period of time that the Strait of Hormuz was vulnerable. What we didn't know was how effective and how damaging shutting it down would be, and that Iran could do that in a way that was smart. All right, how they did it. It was smart. They didn't mine the area to where nobody could go through. They set it up with just threats to where their ships could go through, and this is prior to the U.S. blockade, but their ships could go through, or people that they wanted to go through could, and then their adversaries, they couldn't, or they made it more difficult. If we walk away with that being the status quo, it sets a very dangerous precedent around the world. Iran is a state actor. I think it's a bad state actor. The Houthis are not. And we've got other groups around the world that might look at this and decide that they have, go back to Operation Rough Rider with the Houthis in the Red Sea. We did not defeat the Houthis. We came to a ceasefire agreement. They still have the capabilities to shut down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait if they want. It takes very little. It takes mostly just a threat. So my concern right now is that we've had enough. It's taking too long. It's too complicated. It doesn't look like the ceasefire talks are making any progress. Iran is emboldened, seeing what they've been able to do with the Strait. And if we walk away right now, it's hard to tell the negative impacts those would have around the world for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it's like I always say, the bad people, the bad actors, the bad players, they thrive on chaos and instability on the world stage. And, when the people that are supposed to be upholding democracy and values and norms, across the planet, they aren't doing those things. It allows these groups and these bad actors all over the place. And I think to a point, we've already kind of sent that message by, engaging in this war as we were, engaged in talks in some way, shape, or form with the last Iranian Ayatollah. So it's like, to a point, we've already sent that message where it's like, a lot of these players, their best kind of option is to make a push for, if not nuclear weapons, for the biggest stockpile or the biggest bang that they could get for their buck, to have the biggest bartering chip, the biggest seat at the table, if you will, when the United States inevitably comes calling, so they could get the best deal or the best outcome for their nation or for their for their proxy group or whatever it is, whoever it may be. So I think we've already kind of, to a point, sent that message, you know what I mean? And like you said, I think it would only, that would only expound that message if we were to just kind of walk away. Like, I think the reports are suggesting that Trump's starting to get a little, tired, a little frustrated, a little sick of dealing with this whole aspect. So, he's maybe looking for different routes off. But, speaking of like some of the things that he said, I know being part of the 101st and being part of the military yourself, like, Trump's called a lot of these military maneuvers, like the blockade, like some of the greatest, most impressive military actions in history. And it's like, my mind immediately goes to things like, George Patton taking the Third Army into Bastogne to relieve the 101st. Obviously, you could talk about the Okinawa landings, D-Day. I mean, there's so many different things that we could talk about, and even, more recent too. But it's like, as somebody who, did serve, did put your right hand up, did, go out there and do your duty to protect this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Like, what does it mean to you when you hear these like hyperbolic, ridiculous statements that just, are not true? You know what I mean? So it's got to have a little bit more meaning to you guys that have actually had the blood, sweat, and tears put into this than people looking on from the outside. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's just a political thing. We do that with everything in politics now, right? It's the greatest bill. It's the most important election. It's all of that. So for the people that are taking part in the operation, it means a lot. It hits home that you're a part of something historic. I do think we exaggerate that from time to time. But some of these operations that were carried out, going in to get the fighter pilots that were down inside of Iran, I mean, that is arguably one of the most daring operations in U.S. military history.
Do we know they were down inside Iran, though?
The two F-15 pilots?
Yeah. I mean, do we know I don't even know if we know the entire backstory of that. Where are the pilots? Have they been like, why wouldn't Trump bring them out front and center first thing to be like, here's my parade, here's my victory lap? Like, there's a lot of questions. And again, a lot of this is brought on by just the lies, the indirect answers that you get, the non-answers that you get from this administration and have been. So it kind of, it promulgates propels this there's got to be something else going on behind it. But, to a large extent, I know you stay, I don't want to say non-political in your coverage. You do a good job of, in my judgment, because we use your videos so much at kind of, calling it as you see it, calling the balls and strikes. But a little bit more, I feel like you've been like, at least touching on the fact that this is insanity. Like, a lot of what we're seeing now is just blatantly just insane, is not the norm, is not the way we used to do things. And it's kind of, I can feel it hitting home just a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Well, it's I think the Iranian regime was evil. They've got a lot of American blood on their hands, and I'd like to see something done to that end. JCPOA was not perfect, not by a long shot. Now looking back, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that actually was a little bit preferable to where we sit today. Right. So this is a great example of I'm on board with doing more to try to eliminate the problem that is the IRGC, that is the Iranian regime. And I would love to be able to take steps within reason to help the Iranian people find freedom. But what we're seeing right now is just chaos. Like, we didn't talk to our allies going in. You cannot convince me that we had this thing planned out for a long-term conflict. We still have troops on their way over there right now. What? Like, are you kidding me? They weren't in place. They're still moving into place 3 months later. Like, that's not how a war is carried out. So there's a lot of things we've been very effective at. The targeting of a lot of aspects inside of Iran has been crazy. The fact that we have effectively air superiority over Iran is wild. That was not expected, and we got there so fast. But it's been a mess. And I mean, every other day there's a peace deal on the table, and then it just ends up being, I don't know how else to say it, but like, it's just insider trading. There's no peace deal on the table, and that is so infuriating, because this is a serious subject.
And it's crazy that you say that too, because it is pretty blatant when the Monday morning, statements come out of, we're going to have a negotiation. Today's to come, we have ceasefire now and the deals to come. And next thing you know, it's like, not only are they not negotiating with each other, you're hearing the reports come out, and it's actually the Trump administration sending the Pakistani mediators a message. They're giving it to the Iranians, whoever that may be. Again, Trump doesn't still seem to know exactly who he's communicating with or bargaining with or negotiating with at this point. And then on the other side, it's the Iranians again passing statements to the Pakistani mediators, them kind of putting it out there, and then it's like, the back and forth ensues. So that's why a little bit of why I asked earlier, like, it's difficult to get a handle on like, what is the situation? Because there's even within Iran, and like you said, it's a strange place to be in, because I think a lot of Americans do recognize exactly what you said, the brutalities and the atrocities committed over there, and what the the Iranian population and the civilians go through and have been through with the regime is horrible, and we would like to see that change. But I just don't think that what we're seeing right now, anybody has the confidence that that's actually going to happen. It seems like a lot more harm is coming from this than actual, good things that we could say, okay, we achieved this goal or we obtained this victory or anything along those lines. You know what I'm saying?
I'll throw a World War II analogy that I've been beating around a little bit in this regard. You'll get it. But the Nazis were bad. And the moment we entered the war, especially our friends in the UK, wanted us to, and of course the Soviet Union at the time, they wanted the United States directly involved in mainland Europe. We didn't kick off the Normandy invasion until June of 1944. We could have gone in 42, in 43, first half of 44, but we weren't really ready. And I know Eisenhower was getting a lot of, and Roosevelt were getting a lot of pressure to come sooner and alleviate.
Stalin really wanted us to get something going.
Right. Yeah. But I know one of the things that Ike was concerned about was if we're not ready and we fail, this isn't a matter of regrouping and coming back next week, next month, or next year. This might be the only shot we get. And I think about that with the war in Iran is they're bad, would love to see a regime change. I don't know that we went about this at the right time and in the right manner. And it looks more and more like we're going to walk away with a wounded Iran. And I don't know when we're going to have the stomach to go back and actually do what needs to be done to, remove that regime and help stand up a functioning country. That might not be in the cards anymore.
Now, before we switch over to speaking about what's taken place recently with the ongoing war in Ukraine, where do you see this situation, the conflict with the war in Iran? Like, do you see it escalating before, do you see escalation before negotiations? Do you see where do you see this going? As military minded as you are, what is your best guess? Obviously nobody knows and nobody can say for certain, but what would you say if somebody kind of, gun to your head, where are we going to be in 2 weeks, 2 months, that kind of thing?
So this is a really interesting time period because I'll steal this from Admiral Mark Montgomery, FDD. We talked to him a couple weeks ago and he pointed at this window right here. He said, do not expect serious military action before the meeting between Trump and Xi. They're meeting right now, or it's in that period, because any sort of resumption of hostilities could throw the meeting off track. So he said, wait until they come back, give it 24, 48 hours, and then he expects, and I think he's probably right, we're going to see a resumption of hostilities. There are too many loud voices, powerful voices inside the U.S. government right now advocating that we just need another week or two of strikes. I don't believe that. I don't think that's going to move us closer to an agreement, but it's something you can do. It's action you can take, and it's action that we have not taken since this ceasefire went in place. So my guess is by the end of this week, maybe the weekend, I know Trump likes to strike after markets close. So maybe this weekend we see a resumption of hostilities with the U.S. ramping up strikes inside of Iran. I don't think that moves us any closer to an end of the war. I think long-term we're looking at kind of this, not a stalemate, but it's this middle ground. We're going to keep assets in the region. The Iranian economy is going to continue to suffer, and we're going to find out that the Iranian regime doesn't really care that their economy is in the
I just still don't think they grasp the difference. And you brought this point up earlier with their successes in Venezuela and the difference between the society, the way that Venezuela works, the way that it was structured, and the way that Iran is structured, and the way that they function as this, religious, hard-lined element to it that, again, you don't see in Venezuela. There's a lot more. I know there's detractors and people that don't like the Ayatollah and his family and the way that the regime has been treating the people. But there's also that aspect of, okay, we're being bombed. There's been war crimes committed in our country. It's almost given them the, and again, I hate to bring everything back to World War II, but we found out that you can bomb a civilian population into capitulation. You know what I mean? If anything, it strengthens their resolve, and it makes it makes them more hardline and fanatical, and makes them want to, defend, even if they don't agree with the government, and even if the government got them in that position to defend their homeland or their territory or their people. You know what I mean? It just gives them something to hang on to themselves, where before that may have been not there. Again, we talk about the protests that were happening in the streets not all that long ago, and now look where we are here.
One challenging point here, Brian, that I think I am guilty of just kind of talking through and not articulating well, is the middle ground here is a negotiated settlement. But President Trump and his administration has been so adamant that the JCPOA put together under Obama was so bad that they can't have anything that is going to be relatable to that, which means that it needs to be far more advanced, far more comprehensive to really hammer the Iranian regime. We're not close to that right now. So this whole middle ground of hash out some sort of settlement is very, very unlikely, because that's it.
Let me pose a quick question for you. Is it more about that they didn't like what was in the JCPOA, or is it more about the fact that it has Obama's name attached to it? Do you know, I'm serious question, because we've seen this through line in Trump's administrations of just whatever had Obama's name on it, anything that's got Biden's name on it or anything has got to be scrapped. Even if we don't have a replacement, even if we don't have anything to take its place, like we're just going to scrap it and get rid of it. So I just think now, we've been saying for a long time that no matter what deal comes out of this, I think that geopolitically on the international stage, Iran is going to come out of this with much more power, and the people and the players in the region are going to have to respect not only the ability they have to lob missiles and drones into their territories, but also the ability they have to affect control over the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, like we've been talking about, possibly the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, like that's going to have to be respected. And whether it's, paying tolls or, taking the routes that designated by Iran, or having to call them for permits or whatever it may be, like I think the deal is going to be much, much worse, and it's going to be, just a joke and an embarrassment. And much like you said, going to send the wrong message to a lot of the wrong people in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, what you're describing there is an American defeat. Unfortunately, like that, when if Iran were to come out of this with those capabilities, the problem is where we sit. You're kind of talking about that, or the Iranian regime just gives in and gives us everything and more that we've been demanding since the beginning of the conflict. But it's hard to see that playing out right now. Most of what Iran has put out there in terms of their negotiations have become more hard. They've demanded in the most recent one, assuming that it's accurate, that they have full sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. They want control over that strait. That wasn't on their list of demands on February 27th. So I just think we have boxed ourselves in a little bit. I think the perfect solution here is working back towards some sort of JCPOA, and then we just tackle it as we go. But again, that's not a great agreement. But from where we sit right now, if we could just get back into that box, then we can work within that set. But I don't think that's in the cards. I think that's politically unviable.
See, to me, like investigators on the ground and people following the enriched uranium from the time it's dug up to its final destination sounds a lot better than anything that we're likely to get out of this deal. You know what I mean? As many people can pick apart the JCPOA, and we could have done better in multiple aspects, or changed this, or changed that, or done this differently. It's just like, it's going to be nowhere near, in my estimation, in my opinion, nowhere near comparable to any of the situation, especially geopolitically, that we're going to come out of looking, in this situation, come out, having to deal with. But, we could spend the whole hour in Iran, I'm sure, and we probably could have spent the whole hour on Ukraine and what's taking place there. But just to switch over to, the war in Ukraine here, I just want to first off thank you for your coverage. Thank you for, the knowledge and the insights that you give to people that, again, are fighting through all of the nonsense and the propaganda and the rhetoric to try to figure out what's going on. Not only for that, but also your contributions to Cars for Ukraine, your contributions and working with people like, the great people over at NAFO, the 69 Sniffing Brigade. So like, I'm serious. You've done, it's incredible to me what, I don't want to say YouTubers because it sounds like a slight, but like, just social media content creators were able to do and continuously are able to do. People like Jake Bro, Anna from Ukraine, Kate from Kharkiv, like, even did the great chat here at Blunt Politics. We were responsible for getting a campaign finished for the 69 Sniffing Brigade and sent over a vehicle for the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. And just, the feeling that you get of making some difference. And, having been to Ukraine myself during this war, and I drove basically the same pickup trucks that we're responsible for getting in Cars for Ukraine and 69 Sniffing Brigade from Warsaw, Poland to Lviv, and then from Lviv all the way to Kyiv. I met frontline soldiers. I was fortunate enough to get to meet and tour different drone facilities and speak to different heads of whether it was just different territories within Ukraine or other people, and they were so very appreciative. And I know you've been there yourself, and you've had the opportunity to take these vehicles in, so how much they care about this and how much it means to them. So just, from my chat and everybody here, a big thank you for everything that you've been able to do for the people of Ukraine and obviously the military over there as well.
It's awesome to be a part of that, man. And it's the push in that direction was people asking for good causes. They wanted to contribute. They wanted to play a part, and they didn't know how. And you go back to the beginning of the war, there was a lot of scamming going on, a lot of shady stuff. The nature of a messy conflict, and people, even in a situation like that, are ready and willing to take advantage of folks, unfortunately. So there was a lot of confusion on what organizations were good, what was reliable, how can we help directly, and yeah, that's how that all started. Was linked up with a couple of groups that were awesome, continue to be great, and the audience has been incredible, man. So cool to see the impact they've made.
That brings up 2 points. One is, did you ever think that you would see the value of 1 million anywhere near a fundraiser that you were involved in, or you being able to contribute millions of dollars to this hugely important situation we have going on now, the biggest war in Europe since World War II? Like, does that still kind of shock you at times when you see just how much you've been responsible for, you and your community? Like, it's got to at times be like, holy shit type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's uncharted territory too, right? So it's not like growing up you saw something like this happening and we were in real time, like, oh wow, we can provide assistance to a nation at war. It didn't even exist a few years ago, certainly not at this scale. So it's a bit surreal, I think is the way to put it. When I was in Ukraine this past winter, we went to a headquarters, and in the corner was a toolbox that had my name on it from a fundraiser we had done. So we were down there, we went to the wrong place, and like we were supposed to meet up with someone, we went in the wrong building, and we were just kind of waiting. So we were just kind of looking around, and there was one of our fundraised toolkits there in the corner. So when you see that, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool stuff.
No, that's pretty cool. And then the other point you bring up is like, and you touched on, is just how much not only the coverage of this war has changed, but the war itself has changed. Like, we're now over 4 years into what was supposed to be reported as a 72-hour-ish operation that was going to lead to the collapse of Kyiv and the ultimate takeover of Ukraine by the Russian military. And to see now that we're at a point where Vladimir Putin basically had to go hat in hand to, Trump or Volodymyr Zelensky and basically ask permission to have his Victory Day parade, which is, as you know, is extremely important, almost a religion within Russia itself. Like, to see those two disparities and to see where we were and where we've come. I mean, even talking about drone warfare, which I'll have you touch on. I mean, we went from seeing personal FPV drones of $100, $150 dropping, a $20 grenade into and through sunroofs to what we're seeing now take place and the changes that we've seen. So can you speak a little bit of how not only has the war progressed and changed, but warfare in general, and also the way we've had to cover wars like this?
Well, I think we're in an interesting spot right now, because I think for the first time since 2022, Ukraine has the initiative on the battlefield, and they haven't for a long time. I mean, I would argue that even when they were carrying out their summer counteroffensive in 2023, they didn't really carry the initiative. Russia knew it was coming. They largely stopped Ukraine before they were able to even breach that first line. So we're talking about a major period of time right now where Russia really is on their back foot. And there you go. Love it. There's article after article right now popping up about how something's changing. And what's changing is that Ukraine has had to adapt in order to stay in the fight. And Russia's been a little bit slower. So we've seen a number of innovations when it comes to drone warfare. And Ukraine is leveraging that now. It's a very slow and methodical process, and it's starting to pan out. So yeah, it's an interesting time in the war, to say the least.
It's just, to me, I'm kind of like, it's a two-pronged aspect for me, because it's like, I see these headlines, is Ukraine turning the tide of is turning the Russian tide, and it's like, again, we're over 4 years into what they thought was going to be, let's say, a weak campaign. So it's like, it's hard for me to say that, Ukraine in the positions that they are hasn't been having the upper hand, hasn't been winning this war basically since the time that armored column was turned around outside of Kyiv. You know what I mean? So, but I do understand what people are talking about as far as now, Ukraine having the ability to send more missiles and drones into Russia than Russia is sending back, or Ukraine's ability to eliminate and remove Russians from the battlefield at a higher rate than the Russians are able to replace them on the battlefield, or again, just the general territories that either Ukraine has taken back, or the difficulties that Russia is having establishing a foothold or taking territories that they need. So I understand I understand the aspects, but to me, it's like, I've always been on the side of like, as long as they're alive, as long as they're able to hold, and I know it's a substantial portion of Ukraine, but comparative to what the stated goals were of Russia, like it's a comparatively, and I know it's easy for me to say this in my cushy fucking house, and I don't want to make it sound, bad or anything, but it's a comparatively small slice of territory compared to what the Russians want to achieve, and I want to make sure to put that caveat in there. So it's like, I've always been on the side of giving them credit. So like I said, it's kind of like, I understand what people are saying, and it's a good thing to see. So that'll lead me into, do you believe the momentum is behind the Ukrainian military going into the, now in the spring offensive, going into the summer offensive season?
It is. The big issue right now is something called middle strike that Russia is struggling with. So Ukraine for a long time has been focused on stopping Russians at the front, understandably so. You don't want the infantry or the tanks to break through. And then over the course of the last couple of years, we've seen more and more strikes deep inside of Russia, focused on a number of things, from industrial facilities, oil processing, refineries, airfields at times. That middle strike area was really reserved for HIMARS, ATACMS, and Storm Shadows, which are incredibly effective, but Ukraine doesn't manufacture those and didn't have a lot of them. They've started to develop and really focus in on those middle strike options. So call it 50 to 300 kilometers on or about effectively the entire occupied territory of Eastern Ukraine. Russia can't defend that anymore. The air defense assets are getting knocked out so fast, 30 to 50 a month for the last couple of months. That's far more than they're able to produce in a given month. It's opening up a lot of new targets for Ukraine inside of Russian-held territory. Look, at the beginning of the war, Ukraine shut down the skies. Russia did not achieve air superiority. Ukraine achieved air denial effectively over the battlefield. And we slowly saw that shift to helicopters now as well that are not used anywhere near the front line. Over the course of the last few years, Ukraine has effectively shut down the Black Sea. In fact, we get Russian mill bloggers every day arguing that Crimea is getting hit so hard because they can't put their ships out into the Black Sea to stop these drones. They can't serve as sentries to be out there on the defensive. They have to wait until these Ukrainian drones and missiles are over land in Crimea before they take action. And the reason for that is the unmanned surface vessels that Ukraine has thrown out into the Black Sea. Despite all of this, we have still seen slow but steady Russian advances wherever they choose. It's slow, it's costly, but when they say we're going to push it Pokrovsk, over time, they end up taking Pokrovsk. We've seen that time after time after time. Now it might be months or even years to get there, but it's just this steady stream of manpower and equipment. Ukraine is putting a kink in that right now. So the air is shut down, the sea is shut down, and now we're seeing where Russia is having a hard time keeping their frontline troops supplied. This is very new. This is very recent, and it's the kind of thing that'll play out over a longer period of time. But just in the last week, we've seen Ukrainian strikes against Russian logistics in Mariupol, in Donetsk City, in other areas far back from the front. That makes it that much harder to put men and equipment forward and sustain them in the fight. So for the first time in this war, it's looking like Ukraine has really impacted the Russian ability to grind out any sort of advance on the battlefield. Now, that doesn't mean that Russian advances are stopping. It doesn't mean that they aren't going to continue trying. But their ability to exploit any sort of breakthrough has diminished significantly in just the last few months.
And that's why I use your coverage a lot of the time on the show. It's kind of, it's grounded in reality. A lot of the times, I'll play, I forget the name of the channel here. I believe it's called The Military Show, or if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of times they do great work as far as the video is concerned, but, the narrative and kind of the title to the video will be a lot, hyperbolic sometimes, and kind of go, the war is over, Ukraine just won the war type of aspect. You know what I mean? Those things. And it's like, I try to keep my audience grounded in reality. We can talk about the successes of the Ukrainian military. We can talk about the frontline successes, but we also need to make sure that we recognize that this is a really big war. There's a lot of different moving parts. There's a lot of different aspects to this, and it's not all, sunshines, rainbows, and good things. Like, you got to talk about the bad things that are happening. Like we saw recently, we were talking about the push that the Russians were trying to make up the Dnipro towards Zaporizhia, and the fact that luckily the Ukrainians seem to be able to, counteract that attack and have been sending in more troops in that region. region. We've talked about kind of the fortress belt that Ukrainians have been relying upon, whether it's the Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, up to some say Lyman, down to Drushivka, Konstantinivka area. So it's like the push towards that and how to utilize that just in case type of aspect. So that's why we like using your coverage, because it's not the war is over, this means the end of the war type of aspect. It's grounded in reality. And something else you touched on there, which I'm dying to get your take on, is the Azov's recent skirmishes, we'll call them, adventures over Mariupol, and we've seen them flying over the Azov steel plant. Does that send the signal that do they get the feeling that I got from that, where it's like, we're back, motherfuckers type of aspect? And pardon my French, but it's like, that's going to send a big signal and give a big boost to these people, which obviously suffered so greatly at the hands of the Russians in Mariupol. Anybody, again, I implore people to watch 20 Days in Mariupol if you're unaware of what took place around there. But do you think it's as big of an event? And do they get as much of a fire under their ass as it gives me to see them now have the ability to at least punish the people that are now occupying that territory? I know they're not going boots in the ground into that area, but at least show them that we're still here, we still have the ability to see you and strike you type of thing.
I think it was a big morale piece, and this is one where in war you've always got the thing that's just a PR move, and then you've got stuff that really needs to that will impact the war. This was a little bit of both. There's a lot of areas that Ukraine could have hit along that road leading from Mariupol to Crimea, and they did target a number of it. But they also added some clips showing flying over the Mariupol steel plant, the Azovstal steel plant. They showed a picture of videos flying over the Donetsk stadium. Like, there's value in showing we're here in broad daylight, flying large fixed-wing drones. When Azov released that footage, they said something along the lines of, "We've returned, more to come," like kind of suggesting. And look, they're not on the verge of marching into Mariupol, but that was the message they were sending, was
right.
This is step one. Before too long, we'll be back home in Mariupol. So it was significant, man. The fact that these drones are flying, I mean, when you see the footage, and I'm sure you've showed it on your channel, like, it is clear as day in broad daylight, and there is nothing there to protect from these drones. They have free reign and are just hammering Russian logistics. That's a problem for a group that they've not felt that part of the war for years. That's supposed to be a safe space, and it's not.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the message that was sent by that was the message that the Russians try to get through when they sneak these 2- and 3-man units behind Ukrainian lines to take a picture of a flag at this, geographically well-known spot, so that they can then lose their lives in return. The Ukrainians end up getting the flag, but the propaganda victory is sent back to the Russians and the military commanders to say, "Oh, look, we've taken over this territory." It's like, the things that they try to obtain using that type of propaganda shit is the exact thing that I believe, in my opinion, is what the Ukrainians were able to achieve within these strikes. And obviously, like you said, the flying over the Azov steel plant itself is just a symbol in and of itself of, okay, we're still here. You know what I mean? I think that was the message. And I think, the Ukrainian people, anybody that saw the footage probably got that message.
It sent a message to the Russians as well. So right. the flag planting operations that, for what it's worth, both military high commands are just living with. Like, this is the stupidest thing. Don't do it. But we still see it from time to time. I guess you get a couple clicks here or there. There's not a lot of value to it. Mm-hmm. But what happened with the recent strikes this far south is Russian mill bloggers are going, "Oh shit, if you can hit Mariupol, that means you can hit anything in the occupied territories." So it's not just a matter of that is on the coast. There is nowhere further south than Mariupol. So that showed that Ukraine can hit anything in there. There's trucks burning on the side of the road. And we saw footage from Russian mill bloggers saying, "Look at these strikes. They aren't used to seeing strikes down there." So it alerts everybody. You're driving a fuel truck around in Mariupol 3 weeks ago. It's kind of easy going. Now,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That changes situations very, very quickly. And it's not something that can be well hidden, because when a fuel truck explodes, you can see that from a ways away. And for days after, there's marks on the ground.
pair that up with the willingness of the Russians to post this footage on Telegram or wherever they can post it, and it, it gives you an idea. But the kinetic sanctions as well, like talk about how well the strikes that we've been talking about have been doing to kind of mitigate the benefit that Russia has been seeing in the uptick in oil prices, and obviously the relieving of certain sanctions and stuff like that. So I like this phrase I've been talking about on the show, this, the kinetic sanctions that Ukraine has been involved in. I don't know who sparked that term, but I really enjoy that term. But can you speak a little bit of how effective they have been? And again, we talk about sending messages, the message of Azov going back into Mariupol, and again, being able to strike 1,500 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers behind, Russian lines is obviously going to send, a distinct message, not only to the Russian hierarchy, but also to the population, the Russian population themselves too. So.
Yeah, so I mean, we'd have to defer to an oil expert to get into the details of this, but essentially, with the Strait of Hormuz shut down, oil prices went up. Russia is an oil exporter, and they had the ability to try to take advantage of that, and they did for a period of time. They were able to get a fair amount of oil out. However, Ukraine kind of upped the ante and started going after a number of their top processing facilities, and it's had pretty significant effects. Hard to tell exactly, like TUOPS, I think is what it's called. Holy cow. Like that thing was burning nonstop for probably a couple weeks. Like every 3 days, they'd finally put the fire out, and then Ukraine would hit it again. And with each one of these, it's in this weird spot where like the refineries still operate. They're still there. They might not have even stopped entirely, but it's at least reduced for a period of time. And as the damage increases, it goes from, maybe pause for a few hours to a few days to it has to be shut off for a longer period of time. So it's kind of Russia's economic lifeline, and Ukraine is hitting it. Very hard to tell. And I think we all got this wrong. Everybody expected the Russian economy to essentially fall off a cliff a long time ago, and it hasn't. So I think it's very hard to look at some of these strikes and really get an idea of how much impact it's having on the Russian economy, but it's something. When you have a major refinery going offline for 1 day, that's significant. And the next time it goes offline for 5 days or 7 days. So it's kind of a never-ending battle for Ukraine. But I will note that these are sensitive targets inside of Russia, and they don't show the ability to be able to defend them. TUOPS is a great example. We'll stick with that one. It got hit 4 times in 2 weeks. Are you kidding me? Like, did they? I think
they just hit the Perm one again a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And then you put that with Primorsk, Ust-Luga. I mean, it's kind of been endless at this point. As far as their abilities, the effectiveness that they have to obviously get around whatever Russian air defenses are in place or whatever Russian air defenses are not in place in these areas. You know what I mean?
Well, in Russia's defense, nobody has enough air defense assets to cover a country that large.
Right.
All the time. So Ukraine is leveraging that vulnerability. Yeah.
And hopefully it's getting more apparent to the, to the citizens of Russia, you know what I mean? Any way in which, more pressure can be applied to Putin, whether it's from the, the hardline nationalists that he's got behind them that are mad that he hasn't achieved more goals and hasn't taken more of Ukraine, or the people, in his country that are like, okay, this is hugely impactful. This is devastating. Our ability to work with people on the international stage, the sanctions and the economy have obviously taken hit, not to the effect that, we'd like to have seen. And that, like you touched on, that's kind of been a frustrating part of this is, thinking that any day now you're going to see that, and it was just going to dive off a cliff, like you said. And we just, it goes to show how isolated and kind of that brings us back to a little bit of Iran. The reporting that now Iran is a little bit more insulated than we may have been led on to believe, as far as being able to withstand the blockade and the economic impacts of that. If we're going another 120 days, 150 days, 200 days on, where they're able to kind of, they're getting hurt, but they're able to withstand that. Meanwhile, we're seeing $8, $9, $10 a gallon gas. Like that's kind of what they're hoping for. So, similar case in this aspect as well, but hopefully it's sending the right message where these deeper strikes into the Urals, where again Stalin in World War II took up some, I think it was like 1,600 factories, moved them some 600 miles into the Urals, set them all back up, and thought that they were safe. Now that those territories are being struck, and hopefully it's sending a signal, a message to the Russian people that, nowhere's really safe now, and the war is getting kind of ever closer to their doorstep with the proliferation of drones and longer range drones as well.
Absolutely, and it's increasing too. Week to week, we're seeing more drones striking at longer distances, more sensitive targets. So there's a lot of dooming on Russian Telegram right now when they're seeing these drones impact places like Perm and Tuap, saying like, what is happening? Like this is only going to increase if they can't. A lot of what they're pointing to right now is not defensive in nature. It's toppling the Ukrainian government. So they're saying the only way we can stop this is by finishing the war. And I think we're probably on the same page that doesn't seem like it's around the corner.
Well, speaking of toppling governments, there's been a lot of reporting and rumors and speculation coming out recently of kind of how afraid and distrustful, I would say, Putin is of his circumstances. He's been kind of avoiding the dashes that he's normally known to frequent. We've seen reporting of like the security mitigations that he's trying to take with people that are working around him, and they're not allowed to have cell phones or take public transportation. I'm not very sure as to how long those have been rules, but there's been more and more talk about he's feeling less and less safe, less and less comfortable. He's doing kind of pre-recorded taped speeches and stuff like that. Like, do you think there's anything that we're picking up on as far as that being truthful, and him feeling a little bit more pressure either from people inside of his government or the population in general to kind of either get this done or something change it somehow?
It's tough to tell, man. It's so locked down. And there are some folks that are just, I think criminologist is the term, where they are just experts on everything. You know what I'm talking about? And they're dialed in.
Yeah.
I did see a story, I think it was today, in the Financial Times, talking about how some generals have convinced Putin that they can take the rest of the Donbass by this autumn, like the next 3-4 months. And if that's the case, if there's people that think that they can, I mean, there's nobody living in reality that sees that happening. So you're talking about, it's almost scary in a sense. Like that's so detached from reality. It makes me a little bit worried about what decisions he could make if he feels that is in the cards. And again, hard to tell how accurate that reporting is because it's anonymous sources, people close to, familiar with the matter. But it lines up with what we're seeing. I mean, they're still pushing for nothing.
Right. But on the opposite side of that, we've seen almost a distinct change in the way that the Russian mill bloggers have been, not what they've been thinking, but what they're willing to say online, at least. There's been a lot more like, hey, things aren't going the way that you guys think they're going, or why the hell are we doing this? Or, why is this being allowed to happen if we're in such a great position? Like a lot of that, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of that being talked about, whereas before, they were either, very hesitant to call out or question any of the, the decisions being made by the leadership or the actions being taken by the military itself. Like, have you seen this distinct change in the way that mill bloggers are kind of, speaking about the actual realities of where the war is as a part, from this, like, propaganda version of, like you just said, taking the rest of the Donbass in 2 days or whatever?
Yeah, I think a turning point was this last October, November in Kupiansk, when the Russian mappers had listed this as an area under Russian control. And we saw, I think was it Gerasimov went forward and explained on camera to Putin how they had taken this city. And there was some pushback, and Putin went on camera and never talks about like settlements being taken or progress at the front. He's always very vague, but he said, we've taken Kupiansk. It's been liberated. And he invited international media to go to the city to see it. Brian, they hadn't taken it. At all. And Ukraine, as he said that, Ukraine was in the middle of this counterattack that has effectively cleared the entire city of Russians. There were a few holdouts in the city center that were effectively just left on their own. And a lot of the mill bloggers kind of had to walk that back and say, what the hell's happening? A lot of criticism then about false reports. And I feel like since then, we've seen a noticeable change because they haven't been able to point to something that is a very clear victory. They don't have the, Crofts was supposed to be the big win in 2025. As they were making more and more progress there, that was overshadowed by this lie that was the taking of Kupiansk. And I think they're running out of things to point to. They need some sort of victory to be able to say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're winning. And that's not a thing on the battlefield right now. They start to make a little progress near Huliopoli, and then Ukraine goes on the counterattack to the north and pushes them back, a couple dozen kilometers. So there's not like they need a thing to say this is why we're clearly winning. And I don't think they've had that for a while now.
Right. And I think that specific moment you were referencing there about, Gerasimov and what he was saying was referenced by one of the mill bloggers. Like, this is what happens. Like, I think he was talking about maybe the permission that had to be granted by Volodymyr Zelensky in order to them to have their May Day parade. And he's like, well, this is what happens when you believe the lies told by the leadership. And when the lies that filter from, the people on the front go all the way up to the Kremlin and then are reported as fact, when in reality, it's nowhere near what's actually taking place. You get this type of situation. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, today we have a hard out at 2. There's a lot more that I'm sure we could discuss. We could do this for hours, whether it's World War II or talking about Iran or Ukraine. So hopefully you'll accept my invitation sometime in the future to continue this conversation. Could you just let my chat know where to follow you, where to find you, anything on Substack, all your social medias, where they could subscribe to the channels and stuff, please?
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you so much again for the invitation, sir. Really enjoyed the chat. It's just my name, Preston Stewart, cross platforms. YouTube is probably the best place. Most content there, but yeah, really enjoyed this, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I got about 3.5 pages worth of questions, and I got through about maybe 7 of them. Half of them was off the top of my head. I'm no Walter Cronkite. It's more of a discussion I like to have more than like an interview. But like I said, open invitation if you have anything you want to promote. If it's your Cars for Ukraine campaigns, if you do another one with 69 Sniffing Brigade, anything having to do with that, if you need a different platform to utilize, get the message out there. I'd be more than happy to do my part to give you my platform to use. So that would be fantastic. And like I said, a ton more that we could get through and we didn't get through. So more than happy to have you again if you do have the time. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you again for taking the time out of your day.
You're the man, Brian. Appreciate you.
Later, buddy. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. And thank you guys here in the chat. Very much appreciated for you guys sticking with me today. Thank you to everybody over on this space as well. Stick around here on Blunt Politics so we can thank everybody that sent in a Venmo, sent in a super chat, so you guys can get the appreciation that you guys deserve. I'll kick it over to my main man, Jeff Waldorf, over there on this space, if I'm not mistaken. Shout out to the mods. Shout out to this space. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And thank you to Preston, as always, for, again, taking the time out of his busy schedule, family, obviously job, content and to keep up on. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, Preston. More than happy to have you back. And like I said, there was a ton that we didn't get through. So hopefully we can make that happen. So thank you guys. Thank you to this space. Thank you to Matt and everybody over there. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And like I said, stick around here on Blunt Politics. Later, guys. All right. What do you say here? Appreciate you. I know a lot of people are probably going to watch this as typical on Wednesday afternoons after it gets posted. I know there's a lot of other great content creators on at the same time on Wednesday afternoons. So if you guys are just popping in, if you're just joining me now, we just had a fantastic conversation with Preston Stewart. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you've seen, I'm sure if there was a way to calculate whose videos we've used the most on this channel, it would probably come out and calculate that we've used more of Preston's videos than anybody else's. So again, to be able to speak to these great content creators with over 1 million subscribers that do such fantastic work, and them taking the time out of their day and being nice enough to talk to, the little podcast that could over here at Blunt Politics, even though we just passed 17K. And I do, hold on, let me check again, because I think we've been on a roll. I think one of my shorts did okay. Let me just make sure. I want to give you guys the accurate, up-to-date information. So I don't want to let me make sure I say thank you. Yeah, we're at 17,954. So we're almost at 18K. So we breezed right through 17K. So if we could continue on that pace, it would be fantastic. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're coming over here from Preston's channel, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this, whether it's now, whether it's when it was live or when it's posted. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Again, we are heavily pro-Ukrainian here, if you couldn't tell from the shirt, the background, and the way that we were talking. But again, we're all on the same page, fighting the same war, hoping for the same outcome here. So I appreciate you guys for joining me. Let's say thank you to the people over here. Let's do YouTube first. We don't do YouTube all the time first. Only a couple here today. Like I said, most people watch this after the show gets posted anyway on Wednesday. So thank you so much, Jeff1848, for becoming a member for 20 months. Let's go. Thanks for the show. Slava Ukraina, Heroyam Slava. Right back at you, Jeff. Very much appreciated. And then Chris over here on YouTube, member for 10 months. Time flies when you're learning the truth. I know. I just, like I said, there's about, and I have a whole nother notebook here of questions that I wanted to get through. Everything, World War II stuff. Like I said, more about Cars for Ukraine, more about Zaporizhia, Konstantinivka, the Fortress Belt. We could have talked for days and days and days. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much to Chris. Thank you so much, JD. I see you popping in there, my friend. Thank you, brother. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for the 5. Shout out to you guys. Thank you to everybody watching over here. Thank you to Jim. 2 years, brother. Congratulations, man. Congratulations. And thank you so much for your kindness, your loyalty, your friendship here, brother. I really do appreciate it. It means the world to me. So 2 years here, really special milestone for people to be hitting. That's a long time to be to follow on a channel. So thank you so much to Jim. And then we'll get over here, see if anybody was nice enough to send over a Venmo. Even if they weren't, we like to thank some people over the last couple days that were nice enough. What do you say we get into it here? So over the last couple days, we'll say thank you to Yakov, because he's the man. You know, who's better than Yakov? He sent in a couple bucks. Much appreciated to you, my friend. Please tell Ari I said what's up. Also to the missus. Thank you so much to Jeff. Much appreciated for the 420. I don't know. I'd probably get demonetized if I read your message again, Jeff, but it was hilarious, I promise. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to, over the last couple days, Geneva as well. Been fantastic. Roger and Karen. Allison, Nancy, Roxanne. Hope your mom's okay again, Roxanne. Damon, Victoria, and Tom, Cynthia, Allison, Peter, Debbie, moms. All of you guys have been so fantastic. V. Sawyer. Again, there's a Venmo just up here in the corner. We don't hide anything behind a paywall. There is no content that you have to pay for. Hopefully the interview we just had with Preston Stewart, I'll be able to cut up into certain sections. You guys will be able to see the entire thing. Nothing is on, no charge for Substack or anything like that. So very much appreciate you guys for joining me. Thank you so much. And then stick around for tonight's show, 8:30 p.m. We got another podcast coming up, 2 hours this evening to be able to dive into all of the craziness we missed today. So very much appreciated. Love to each and every single one of you. Thank you guys for everybody that's going to be watching this later. Make sure you share this show out. Again, if you're watching this after it gets posted, please make sure you leave a comment on the stream, on the on the video afterwards. Goes a long way in helping the algorithm show that you did like what you were watching and to send it out to other people. So thank you guys. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to the chat. And I will see you guys tonight. All right. Love you. Very much appreciated. Much respect to everybody. Stay loud, stay proud, stay aggressive. Slava Ukraina. Heroyam Slava. And I will see you guys this evening. Appreciate you. It's one of these buttons. I know it is. I think it's this one. Thank you, Roxanne. Appreciate you, Yakov. Thank you, Rox. Thank you, Tiff. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jen. Anybody that's not here, thank you, Adam. All the moms. Appreciate you guys. Oh, Vixen. Good to see you over there on Twitch. Appreciate it. See you. Please make sure if you guys joined us late to go back and check out the interview. Please. Appreciate
it. Вітаю, Бостон Брайан. Мій позивний танцор, я представник 72-ї бригади. Дякую тобі і твоїм підписникам за цей донат, за цю чудову машину, яка буде нас возити усіх на позиції, захищати Україну і наближати перемогу. Разом усі до перемоги. Дякую.
What's up, Dame? Good to see you, brother. What's up, Chris? What's up, Mrs. Grove? How are you? Good to see you, Petrazi. What's up, Wesley? What's going on, Nicholas? Hey, Olga. How are you? Good to see you. What's up, Ali Orton? What's going on?
lights off. Off! Turn them off. They're too bright. Turn them off.
Вітаю, Бостон Брайан. Мій позивний танцор. Я представник 72-ї бригади. Дякую тобі і твоїм підписникам за цей донат, за цю чудову машину, яка буде нас возити усіх на позиції, захищати Україну і наближати перемогу. Разом усі до перемоги. Дякую.
The big, fat, sloppy United